Oilerslive podcast. Oilerslive podcast. Oilerslive podcast. Oilerslive podcast.
Now, get ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, and welcome to Oilers Live Tuesday. We've got a special event for you tonight. We've got the voice of the Edmonton Oilers. Needs very little introduction on our fan base, Mr. Jack Michaels. Thanks for joining, Jack.
How we doing, fellas?
We are doing great.
I lost my liquor license, Jack.
You lost your liquor license?
I don't know whether to cry or wind my watch. We got Jack Michaels on the show.
Why are you telling me you lost your liquor license after I agreed to do this show?
I thought I'd quote the great Mike Lang for you on my way in.
Oh, all right. I got you.
I'm off my rocker. I'm pretty excited.
Proper deal. That's all.
There you go.
Awesome. Great to have you, Jack. And of course, we've got my co-host tonight, Mr. Dash in the Park. Welcome again. Jack, I know we got limited time with you tonight. And following the second half of our show, we've also got AJ Hayfley from DNVR. Talk about the Colorado Avalanche. But let's start with you, Jack. And lots, we've had this off season. I think every year seemingly gets a little bit more exciting when you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. It felt like a bit of a. I've been saying this all off season. I said it's felt like a bit of a quiet off season for the Oilers, but it's been anything but quiet, and it's been kind of exciting. Do you think this is, in your estimation? I mean, like, every year, is it just getting more exciting as we lead up to what we believe is going to be a Connor McDavid Cup?
Well, I mean, I think you can firmly say that Edmonton is in the group of 7 or 8 contenders with a realistic shot at a Stanley Cup entering the season. I think, it's certainly the second consecutive year you can say that. I felt like Edmonton had a strong push in 21 that, was mitigated a little bit by the fact there wasn't, a true home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs. That was just a weird year, but I definitely think, anytime you go to a conference final, you instantly stamp yourself as a legitimate threat. You come back the next year and you crawl into the top 6 overall in the league. And, you found a very resilient Vegas club that found a way to beat you. They found a way to beat you by 1 point in the regular season over 82 games, and they found a way to beat you when you had them, up 2-1 in Game 5 late in the second period. I mean, that for many people, they've forgotten that the Oilers were about 25 minutes away from being up 3-2 in that series going back to Edmonton, and they, of course, then become the prohibitive favorite to represent the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup final. And, who knows, obviously. I think, having said that, you still didn't win it, but I think it does say that you're here, you're in the mix, and if things break right for you, I don't think there's a team right now that's a heavy favorite. I mean, that's the other thing that's happened right now with Edmonton's ascension. It's coincided, in my estimation, with, kind of the demise of the consistent super team. You don't have a Chicago or LA that you know is going to be one or the other is going to be there every year. I think even as they were compiling that record, the sense was that Boston was putting everything together correctly in 1 year, but it wasn't necessarily a sustainable situation the way Tampa's reign was. And Tampa's reign is now coming to a close. So I think, the combination of Edmonton's ascension with the fact that the one team where maybe you thought, all right, they're young enough to be a perennial favorite for years in, years out. Well, that didn't materialize when, Gabe Landeskog wasn't able to return to action. I mean, Colorado was the one team that you're thinking, okay, they could be here for a while. And don't get me wrong, they're still a legitimate threat, but they don't have their captain. So it's a combination of Edmonton arriving as a perennial contender and the fact that, I think if you look at last year's champion, I don't think you'd say Vegas was a dominant champion. They were a worthy champion. In my mind, there's a difference. And what I mean by that is going into this season, Edmonton is one of about 6 or 7 favorites, none of whom I think you'd say is an overwhelming favorite to represent either conference in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sure seems that way, right? And I think that Landeskog piece is key, and we're going to have AJ Hafley on, of course, later, talk about that and other things about the Colorado Avalanche. When you look at this team, I mean, what do you think? I mean, maybe it's the Jackson signing, maybe it's Connor Brown. What is it that makes the difference that this year people seemingly have this real feeling that this is Edmonton's year? I mean, we've obviously lost a few.
I really don't. I think it's the thought process that, like Washington, I mean, for that matter, like Pittsburgh 16-17, like Washington, like St. Louis, like Tampa, like Colorado, like Vegas, this is now going to be Edmonton, depending on how you want to rate it. If you want to include 17, fine. If you don't, this is still going to be their third or fourth legitimate kick at the can as a real favorite, as a real contender to be in the final. And I include 21, even though that was a weird year. I think, going into that, you thought Edmonton had as much of a chance to come out of the Canadian division as anyone. I mean, the way they finished the season and the perceived and ultimately correct perception of vulnerability on the part of the Leafs, the only team to finish ahead of Edmonton that year. It didn't happen. There was some growing pains, obviously, as they, overcame a deficit and ultimately, beat LA, survived a wild battle of Alberta to get to a conference final, overcame another deficit to beat LA again. I mean, they're down 3 goals, in a game where, they could be down 3-1 against LA. I mean, that's the other thing, just as we can't forget how close Edmonton came to upending Vegas, we also can't forget how close the Oilers were to being out in the first round. And then who knows what happens, right? There might have been more seismic changes than just Jeff Jackson added to the hockey operations department. But that's the league right now. I mean, who's to say if Colorado does survive Seattle even? Who's to say Colorado doesn't, make some noise? I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily, picked Dallas over Colorado if Colorado gets through Seattle, right? Like, so that's the league right now. It's very close. Florida upends Boston. If Boston survives that, if Brad Marchand scores on the breakaway, maybe the Bruins steamroll their way to the cup, and maybe maybe they decide to bring it all back and do it again, right, this year. Instead, they're going to be going through a significant adjustment with no captain on their end. I mean, that's the thing is you look at 2 of the top teams in the league last year, Boston and Colorado, they're not going to have their captain. Now, the Avalanche didn't have their captain last year, so maybe the offseason will allow them to kind of sort themselves out. But again, I think very similar to the last 2 years, Colorado and Edmonton are the first two teams to come to mind. Vegas is aging, right? I mean, they're the defending champions, and they earned it last year, but they're an aging champion. And I don't know whether the goaltender by committee will work, but again, that's the league right now. Because when you look at Edmonton, you can still poke some of the same holes, depth on defense. What's going to be the goaltending situation that you could last year? And that's what's exciting about this league right now. There is no team that you're like, well, they're going to be there for sure. I feel like Edmonton is going to be in the top 8 for sure. I think the Oilers will look at anything other than a trip to the Stanley Cup final as a disappointment. When you get to that stage, that's why people's expectations are high, is because they've been there. They've proven themselves as a worthy contender. I'm not, diminishing what, bringing in Connor Brown and adding some depth up front means. But in my mind, the fact that Edmonton's been there, the fact that their leaders acknowledge the fact that this is a Stanley Cup year or bust, that's what sets the expectations, not, another offseason acquisition. The Oilers have already done that. They've already brought in, Evander Kane and Zach Hyman. They've got some legitimate threats behind McDavid and Draisaitl right now. They've got Matthias Ekholm to give them a little bit more depth on defense. Ultimately, though, they're going to have to play better as a unit defensively, and they're going to have to get some saves to survive May and advance to June.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll ask you one more question here, Jack, and then Dash has got a couple of questions for you, more about your inspiration, as the voice of the Edmonton Oilers. Quickly, you've been around this team now since 2010, but these last runs have been somewhat special for Oilers fans as well as the Oilers themselves. Like, have you noticed in that time, I mean, you talk about it right now, but have you noticed like a big change? I mean, every year we keep saying to ourselves, look, Connor McDavid's had enough. Next year he's going to come out and he's going to will this team to a cup. And he certainly willed his way to the top of the scoring race last year. But do you see a noticeable difference in this core, just from a mental standpoint? Is that something you've noticed, or can you, is it just a professional thing?
Saying the more of a kind of the adult maturation. I mean, Leon and Connor are now adults. I mean, they've got lives. Connor just got married. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins now has a young family. Darnell Nurse has a young family. They're just more seasoned adults. They're not, and I'm not saying every hockey player under 25 is going home to play video games, but there's a certain maturation. There's a certain connectivity that I feel with those players as they've gotten deeper and deeper into adulthood. I think, you relate a little bit more to these athletes. And I'm not trying to say that I have, deep, meaningful personal relationships with that core, because I don't. I mean, there's definitely a separation, and there always will be, and there should be. This is not 1950 anymore. You're not, on the train, and you're not going over to people's houses in most cases. I mean, some broadcasters, some journalists have those kind of relationships with athletes. I don't happen to have one of those, but I can tell you there's just I find when I talk to them now, they come off as more well-rounded human beings as much as anything. Not that they weren't before, but they've just gotten, like everyone, they've just gotten more comfortable in their own skin. They're more aware of other things going on in the world, because they have other things going on in the world. They're not just responsible for themselves anymore. They have significant others. In some cases, they have children now. So that brings a bit of a different perspective. And again, it's we all go through it, right? I mean, I was the same way when I was 24, 25. I didn't have a care in the world, and you just that's what I sense more than anything else. Just a certain perspective, a quiet determination, an understanding of what's expected, and not what's expected by external sources. But I think they realize that, we have given ourselves a chance here. We've got to figure it out. We've got to find a way across the finish line. So from an athletic perspective, they're now in that kind of, they've got their contracts. They've established themselves as significant figures in the game. Now they're looking, for the Stanley Cup. And that's really the last, thing on their ledger. And I think they're comfortable with that. They're okay with that. They know that that's the last hurdle. And I think, part of that knowledge, part of that acknowledgement is just wisdom and having been through the ringer, not just as an athlete, but as a person.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And before we lose you tonight, I'm just going to pass you over to Dash. I'll say thanks, Jack, for joining us. This is the second time on Oilers Live and the fourth time on the Heavy Hockey Network, and we really appreciate you giving time to all of us out here in the hockey community. You can see in the comments and everything, everybody loves hearing from you and seeing you. And then, of course, we appreciate your calls. So Dash, you go ahead.
Your summer.
Yeah. Pardon me, Jack?
I said, you bet, pal, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. Now, Dash, what do you got for me?
What do you got? I know that I also have seen you around town, and you've been gracious with your time, and we've spoke at the Sin Bin, and it's not just on the podcast that you're gracious, so that's appreciated all around. I brought him up earlier. It'll be 2 years tomorrow that the Hall of Fame
Penguin in Park, and I try to support local whenever possible. So Mike and his crew, and you know what, Sherwood Park's been great to me. I mean, it's not anything I have to commit to, and it's a community. The Edmonton area as a whole, you got to understand. I mean, I came here never having set foot in this province before in my life, and I came here with two very young children, and it's quickly become home. I mean, I don't, you don't really. I mean, at least I don't. I don't think of the place where I lived until I was 23 as home anymore. I mean, I've lived more than half my life elsewhere, so I don't think of myself as a Western Pennsylvania guy anymore. I've lived here 13 years. This is my 14th season with the Oilers, and I'm quite grateful that Edmonton and Sherwood Park has taken me in the way they have.
Yeah, it's a great community. I love it here as well. I mentioned him earlier. It'll be 2 years tomorrow that the Hall of Fame announcer, Mike Lang, announced his retirement after 50 years with the Pittsburgh Penguins and 46 years behind the mic. They called him the king of the catchphrases, but I know to you, he was much more than that. To me, he was unmatched in his ability to be able to keep up with that Penguins pace and still maintain that unique vernacular. For me, two-part question. What kind of a role model and inspiration was Mike Lang to you as you got into hockey? And now that you've learned from him and I guess get to call the plays for the fastest and most advanced player the NHL has ever seen, how does that help you?
Well, I mean, you're exactly right in terms of keeping the pace. Mike Lang, from a young age, I was amazed by his ability to rattle off 9-10 minutes of uninterrupted play-by-play with, highly cohesive phrases, everything woven together without a stumble, nary a bobble. I mean, he was just fantastic. And I get it. He's probably remembered for catchphrases. That's not what I remember him for. And I think to some extent, those catchphrases obscured how good he was at his craft, which was play-by-play. And he was a really kind person as well. I mean, just a guy along with fellow Hall of Famers like Chuck Caton and Bob Miller. I mean, these were the guys that I gravitated to when I first came into the league. I mean, Sam Rosen is still in the league.
Doc Emmerich.
Yeah, Doc Emmerich. I mean, these are legendary Hall of Fame guys. Doc in particular, countless phone calls. I mean, I've always found that older generation, I really kind of aspire to be as generous in spirit as they were. I played golf with Chuck Caton this past fall and in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was great to see him. I mean, I really kind of look up to them, not for their Hall of Fame credentials as broadcasters, but their Hall of Fame credentials as people. I mean, they were spectacular. So that's really what I kind of aspire to, or when you talk about a role model, I didn't know it at the time, and I'm obviously impressed with the pace and the standard he set as a broadcaster. But really, for me, it's important to be that same type of guy to guys coming into the league, my own contemporaries, and for that matter, the people that want to steal the odd selfie or whatever in town is remember that it doesn't take a lot of effort to extend yourself for 30 seconds and be a decent person. And that's really more than anything what that generation of Hall of Fame announcers, at least in the National Hockey League, that's where the bar has been set. And that's what I think is the most important thing, because who the best play-by-play guy is quite subjective, but it's very easy to draw the line about who's a good person and who could be a jackass.
Well, we're all very grateful for Mike Emmerich throwing his name down on your resume as a reference.
Yeah, I mean,
we love to have you.
Have to do that. Are you kidding me? I was a minor league guy. I mean,
Unreal, right?
he took the time to, make phone calls. I remember one time he actually answered the phone and said, "Who am I calling today?" And I mean, this is Doc Emmerich who's answering the phone. He didn't have to do that. And Bob Miller, LA. I mean, there's just so many, quality people that, when I came into the league that were very kind and understood what I didn't understand really was that, I still had some learning to do. And, I was coming to a new country, a new league, had to learn a new culture. Canada's different from the US. I have to admit it. I mean, I had that Simpsons mentality of Canada's not being that big of a change and America Junior and all that stuff. I did. I didn't know what I was getting into as far as, hey, this is a different country. This is a different land, a different set of values. And, if I'm going to live in this country, I've got to get to know what makes these people tick. And, as I did that, I mean, that's a struggle, right? Especially when you're not expecting it, especially when you don't know the differences. I mean, I mean, here's how ignorant as I was. I think my first night in Edmonton, I went up to the cash register at a Fat Burger with like an American, $20 bill. Like, are you like, so anyways, I just shake my head at how naive I was. And I was in my 30s, so there was no excuse for it. But, I think a lot of people around the league recognized what I did and that it was a change and that, it was going to be different being the first American to call games for a Canadian team, and that might make an adjustment. And I just had a lot of people, not just here, but around the league that were extremely kind to me. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
That's fantastic. Well, we're approaching the time and I don't want to be disrespectful of that. So I'll have one more quick one and then maybe a request if I can.
You bet.
The question is this, and maybe it's more of a statement that you can just speak to. Ultimately, it's a fortunate situation that we have you as the Oilers play-by-play announcer. I'm sure you find yourself in a fortunate situation. Michael mentioned it earlier that, as Oilers fans, we all feel that there's an inevitable, cup. I don't want to, jinx anything here. And if there's anybody that's superstitious out there, I'm sorry, but we all have this belief that Connor's going to raise a cup. The last time you and I spoke, you told me that you're still stifling a few extra gears and that you got another peak that you can ramp up to. And if that's all possible and you're saving that for the last few seconds of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, how much thought have you given to the fact that you'll be the soundtrack and the narrative for how many Edmontonians' best moment of their life?
Not at all, really, because I'm going to be a very, minute part of that. I'll be grateful to be a part of it, but I don't think of myself as the soundtrack, or I don't, it's very kind of you to kind of suggest that perhaps I'm more important than I really am. I mean, ultimately, I think, I think Edmontonians respect the fact that I live here, that I've adopted this place as my home, and I've become one of them. And I think that would be true for anyone. I mean, the one thing you learn in this business and in most businesses is that you're replaceable. And, if something, God forbid, happened to me, I hope it doesn't, but, if I wasn't here tomorrow, I'm sure the next person would come in and do a great job and earn that same kind of respect. And, the team is the thing, is I guess what I'm getting at. And the team is what's special. And so I don't have anything prepared. You're right. I mean, I'll have an extra gear, but it's not like I'm saving it or holding something back. I just know it'll come out organically because that's the way I've been cut. And but I am confident in the sense that, some people out there think that, I treat every game the same, like it's game 7 of the final. And I would just, if I do have a quiet confidence about me, I would just gently suggest that, no, I'm quite capable of finding another gear. And so I'm not necessarily saving it, but I know it's there. And like you, I'm very optimistic that gear will be utilized in the near future.
Excellent. I certainly do hope you do get to that gear, and no jinxes there. But you are selling yourself a little bit short, Jack. I think you are the face of the Oilers. It's there in the comments beside us. Thank you for invoking that emotion in me.
Sorry, here you got to remember, I'm playing to a crowd that probably digs me. I'm sure if we were in a different chat room, who knows what.
I don't know. There's an LA fan on here saying you're tops in his book after that comment there with
that's very kind of him, and I do appreciate it. I mean, I guess what I mean by that is, the last thing you want to do is kind of make it about yourself. This team is what, when people come up to me and say, oh, great call, and I said, well, did you see the play? I mean, it's pretty easy to sound halfway decent when you got guys like 97 and 29 buzzing around, right? Like,
that's right.
It's not like I mean, no disrespect, but I'm in a little bit different situation than maybe Doc was when he was calling games for those Devils teams, right? I mean, I'm calling games for a pretty electrifying hockey club with some of the most talented people on the planet ever to play.
Jack, before we say goodnight, I just want to know, are we at any risk of losing you to the Blue Jays now after this Tim Anderson, Jose Ramirez fight? Because I hear they're looking for good play-by-play guys now.
Hamilton, the voice of the Guardians. I did see that, and trust me, I think Dan Schulman can sleep well at night. He's a Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame person in his own right. There's another guy. I mean, speaking of guys in this industry who are well thought of, Dan Schulman's another guy. If you're a young broadcaster, you could do a lot worse than to follow in his tracks. But yeah, that was quite the right hand. I think when I was 7 or 8, I threw a couple of those blind punches, but I didn't have the same results that Jose Ramirez did.
I think it'd be a real treat if you could dub your call over that. I think everybody would love to hear that fight.
In the very first game I did, and this is one thing you do learn is, and I'm not going to get super serious about it, but I do remember dialing it back quickly when McIntyre knocked out Evenins, because very quickly it went from, that was a heck of a punch to, wow, I really hope Evenins was okay. And I don't think he played more than a handful of games after that, unfortunately. That punch kind of short-circuited his career. But, it all joking aside, you do have a lot of respect for the athletes to cover, and as kind of fun and uproarious as it is when an Oiler gets an upper hand, you always want to be respectful of that opponent because he's out there just as courageous as the other guy.
You bet.
You would have had to ramp yourself down. That wasn't far after Jordan Eberle's first goal, if I'm not mistaken.
I know that was one heck of a debut, huh? The Oilers won 4-0. Everly scored the goal of the year. McIntyre, who I think celebrated a birthday yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, with the KO. And I think all of us left the rink that night thinking the Oilers were going to go 82-0.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We'll let you get to the rest of your night. Do me one favor. I know the Macho Man is your favorite wrestler of all time. You've got to do me one and take his number one quote, "Too hot to handle and too cold to hold," and throw that on Connor McDavid sometime this season, okay?
Well, I'm more likely. See, I don't think of that as Macho Man's signature. I mean, obviously there's the "oh yeah," but what I liked was when he had all those creams, the cream of the crop. That's
the cream of the crop. Let's hear it.
Cheers,
Good night,
Jack.
Thanks, Jack. Have a great one. And that's Mr. Jack Michaels. Legendary, but amazing voice of the Edmonton Oilers. We've got a bit of
I had to speak at all.
Oh yeah, no, Jack's great, and we, of course, he spoke over his time. We've had a programming change in between, so for all you Avalanche fans, unfortunately, AJ's dealing with something, so he can't make it tonight, but he'll be back. AJ's great, so I know if it's he wouldn't bail if it wasn't serious. So we'll get him back. He's of course the beat writer for the Colorado Avalanche on Denver. Follow him anyway, and when we get him back, we can talk. It's would have been good to kind of hear what the Avalanche were up to. So Dash, you and I are going to cover the rest here. The final 29, if you will, good number. And we'll chat some Oilers hockey. Of course, there's a couple things that came up this week. The Jackson signing is one. Just today, DFO I think is suggesting that Brandon Sutter is going to get a PTO with the Oilers. So we can talk about that. We can talk about Jackson. We can talk about what I said I was hearing out there, which hasn't come to pass yet, but that's Bouchard at 2 years times $3.9 million.
Did you break that? Oh,
I might have. Yeah, Stauffer has confirmed that's what he's heard. Between 3.8 and 4. So we'll talk about that. And any other stories in the chat if you want to talk some Oilers hockey, we'll talk about that. Let's I know you're on, but we're a little unprepared to be talking about some of these things, but we know what's happening and what's out there. What do you think of this Jackson piece? What do you think that means for the Oilers going forward? Are you maybe I'll ask you. I mean, this is the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is, well, it's McDavid's agent. I mean, that's pretty much locks him up as an Oiler for the career. I'm always hopeful, of course. I want to be the positive guy, but these are two sides of the coin, right? And so McDavid's going to have a new agent. Maybe he's got a relationship, but he had a relationship with Ken Holland too. What do you think this Jackson signing means for the Oilers?
I mean, I think there's completely two different sides of the coin on this, isn't there? You and I were walking down a dock in Halifax about 2 days ago and had this conversation. So I think you know what my opinion is, and I'm not sure I should give my real opinion. But ultimately, if you want an insurance policy, I guess, on trying to make sure Connor McDavid stays as an Oiler, and that's the most important thing that you can ever do for the complete future of this franchise, and there's nothing else even close. I don't know. I don't see why you don't do something like that. He's clearly got an incredibly good relationship with Connor, and I firmly believe that the ride or dies. If Connor's gonna stay in Edmonton, then Dry is too, and they'll have that conversation. I know Dry expires first, but there's no doubt if Dry extends, Connor will as well, and there's nowhere else in the league that they can go to play with that guy. So I think they'll stay here, and I don't know. You can nod yes or no if you want me to discuss the other side of the coin, but
no, we'll skip that piece. But I mean, everybody can connect the dots on that one. I look at this, it's all positive, right? Anything you can do to potentially put Connor McDavid as an
Yep.
Edmonton Oiler for the rest of his career is great.
Yep.
Keeping Draisaitl, of course, is going to be the first step to that. To me, the Oilers lucked out by having, obviously, as Oilers fans, we know that they lucked out having Draisaitl and McDavid. We've seen this before with other pairings in the league, right? Notably, Crosby and Malkin, right? Guys, like they're connected. Any pictures you see on social media, it's McDavid and Draisaitl. And so, that's a great thing. I think a guy that understands, the player mentality like Jackson, even whether he's McDavid's was McDavid's agent or not, is just beneficial. And then the other piece to that is, you read nothing but respect for this guy. And maybe to that connect the dots point, there are other people in the organization where that same respect just wasn't talked about openly, right? And with
Or
Jackson,
couldn't be talked about
or
openly.
couldn't be talked about openly, yeah. And so
Connect the
Jackson
dots.
certainly
Yeah.
has that play.
For sure.
Jay says Jackson as CEO was a brilliant move. I think it helps the McDavid situation. Some stranger says, "What do guys know about Brandon Sutter?"
DM me, Jay.
Yeah. Sutter, he's been kind of around the league now. Last place was Vancouver, right? And like he's actually played. He hasn't played many full seasons. I do remember him in Pittsburgh. But watching him in Vancouver, and I remember when they brought him over, there was a bit of a big deal, that he was going there. At the time, he'd had 2 reasonably good seasons as a bottom 6 guy in Pittsburgh, and I remember the excitement around that. And I think just the last few years, with where Vancouver is in the standings, he gets lost in the shuffle, and he's just not a player that I watch. So, if he was a top 6 guy in Vancouver, then I'd probably be able to talk more about him. But the Oilers are clearly needing, well, not clearly, but they would like a couple more upgrades, maybe on the bottom 6, and that's what these PTOs are for. See if a guy like Sutter, who maybe regains some of what he did, he's been pretty good on the face off. He's like a solid bottom 6 guy. I don't know enough about him, but
I watched him play quite a bit in Red Deer when I had Oil King season tickets, and I mean that's a long time ago, and he's a first round pick. But I think more or less what this ultimately comes down to is there's just absolutely squat out there for centers that are PTO available, really, and there's a few, and I'd say they're on the soft side. At least Brandon Sutter comes with some grit, a little bit of tenacity. The last name kind of says it all, I would say.
Yeah, fair.
6'3", 190. He's only 34 years old. Right shot center. I think that's important. And ultimately, whose job do you have to take? Lane Peterson?
Yeah, I mean that's the area, right, that's up for grabs right now. Like nobody's 100% sure on Lane Peterson.
Good on the penalty kill too.
And why not Sutter, right? If Sutter can come in and earn that spot, then why not Sutter, right? There's I think with any PTO, you just kind of hope a guy comes in and plays his way onto the lineup, or somebody by way of competition just makes themselves known as the guy that's going to run into the new season as the 4th line center. And there's not going to be a lot of space for a guy like Sutter in the league right now, right? Like if he, he's kind of getting that. How old is he now? He's actually been around
34
longer than, I was going to say it's been around longer than I even think I knew 34, 770 games in the league in since 2008. So
Yep.
yeah, so it's not like a huge market for these guys, right?
Yeah.
And if he can come in and play even 40 games and do it when a guy like Peterson might not be able to go play the whole 80, then I think
Better than going back to the farm in Viking.
yeah. 100%. They good old Alberta boy. They took off the on a non-hockey related note. They took off the home of Nickelback sign off of
Yeah, I saw
Alberta.
that. Speaking of zero Fs to give, thanks for that.
Oh man! All right,
It's causing traffic. It was causing traffic jams in Hannah while
I
people
know.
pulled
Oh
over
yeah,
to take
Hannah. I was
pictures.
saying Brooks, but Hannah, Alberta. Sorry to those of you.
It's all right.
Hannah.
Hannah's offended, and Brooks smells like shit.
That's right.
It's just fine.
Yeah, it's you go nose blind if you spend any bit of time. You go nose blind pretty quick, or you go crazy.
Hey, I grew up in the chicken capital of Canada. I know all about being nose blind.
Good old Alberta and Saskatchewan boys.
There you go.
Angel says Perry Nelson from USA Today has Skinner on the hot seat, Campbell on the warm seat, and McDavid on the cold seat. I don't even know what that would mean. Sorry, Angel, but how anybody
you'll
can
have
put
to
McDavid on
fill
the
us
cold
in, buddy.
seat would be beyond me.
Or think that I'd watched USA Today.
Yeah, some of those guys, NHL is a part-time gig for them, and if they put McDavid on the cold seat, it's a clear
Indication they don't watch a lot of
That's
hockey.
right. They're gonna be on the cold seat for for the NHL for a while. We've
Do they have
got
Kempe on a cold seat too.
Bouchard, if he comes in at the 2 times $3.9 million. What's your thoughts on that contract?
The second year becomes a flippin' fantastic deal. I would think that we're going to get a Bouchard that quarterbacks the best power play in the league and gets himself 40 to 50 power play points and 20 or so 5-on-5 points, and ultimately drive a price that probably should have been 7 or 8. So this year it'll be tight. Next year it'll be a deal, and then we're going to pay for it through the nose like we did with Nurse, and then everybody's going to bitch about it, and poor Bouchard will probably be hated for it given our fan base, but let's hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is I think 3.9 is going to be the number, and but I think what's left to be decided is how those details pan out. Of course, they backload it so the qualifying offer is larger at the end of the second year. Obviously comparables were Keandre Miller, right? Was one, and his was I think 3.8 if I'm not mistaken.
3.5,
or around. I think it was around 3.8, and then Bowen Byram, same thing, around 3.8. So, would you put those guys in the same boat? Yeah, for sure. Why not?
I wouldn't actually.
No, you wouldn't?
No, not yet.
No?
I don't know, Bowen Byram in a year or two, maybe. I just think Bouchard once Barry got traded, he was excellent. He was everything we could have asked for. He set a record for power play points in the playoffs by a defenseman, man. What else do we want?
On a power play with McDavid and Draisaitl and Nuge.
Oh, here we go. Driving the bus out of town for Bouchard because he's a power play merchant.
That's right. That's right. We got the bus.
We
got the bus running. I think I saw some clips from the Oilers Nation today. Somebody mentioned they thought he was like the new Justin Schultz.
Well, if he gets a high contract, he might be, or the new Horkoff, or the new Nurse, or whatever you want to call it. And it'll be sad because these guys earn their contracts when they're getting these they're earning their money when they get these bridge contracts. And I don't know, we're getting a deal on these guys. I think Nurse played above his pay for 4 years before we had to slightly overpay him. And I'm not even sure it's debatable we are overpaying him.
Yeah. I mean, this time, you've seen maybe a small sample of what Bouchard brings to the table on what was an extremely hot power play, right? I think it's it's a risk. Any time is a risk, right? If you go 3.9 and if you end up with probably around 4.5 in that second year, and that's your qualifying offer, I don't think that he's that far ahead of Keandre Miller and Bowen Byram. I do agree he's a slight notch ahead of them, but not that far ahead. I do, I'm not, as you throw at the straw man there, I'm not trying to, drive him out of town, but certainly, we probably wouldn't be surprised if you put Nurse on the back end and he ended up with a career year in points. Whoever is going to be quarterbacking that power play from the point is going to get points, right? And so is it worth it? I love watching Bouchard. I don't know how he does it. He just seems to stick handle around guys in the most awkward of way. It's not like smooth like Connor McDavid, but somehow he's got the puck on his stick at the end of it all. And that whether it's that it seems like his slap shot takes forever to wind up and release, but he still manages to get that puck off. And it's, I'm still convinced, somebody's going to get injured getting in the way. So
he did injure somebody in one of the Russians from Colorado. Who was that?
Oh yeah,
in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Anyways, I also think that that's the Bouch bomb. I also think that he's, you said he's got a weird way of stick handling through people, and it's awkward and it's not always smooth. Like that also lends into his shot delivery. He seems to get these odd snapshots off, from odd angles and with his hands, close together or far apart, or weird ways of protecting the puck and getting the shot off still. And he always has pepper on it. Doesn't matter. He's like Austin Matthews a little bit that way. I mean, it's not Austin Matthews.
Different shot altogether, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
But the way he can get it off in different ways.
Yeah. So, it's a risk, right? I mean, you don't know how much of that was, but hey, look, if he stays on that power play with McDavid and Draisaitl and Nuge for the next 5 to 8 years, and he continues to get high points as he did, I mean, it doesn't matter. He's worth it, right? He's worth it as long as he can continue to do that. And, Ekholm's there to shield any defensive gaffes that he might make. And I thought he was better defensively at the second half of the season. I think he does better and will continue to upgrade in that as he gets, more mature. I loved what Jack Michaels had to say about these guys becoming adults, not just about them, necessarily wanting it anymore, but just growing up, right? And that, that's key, right? And
they all live in the same community too. Nurse's kids are playing with Ekholm's kids at the playground, and like Ekholm just had their fourth, or all live within 10 blocks of each other. Like, it's not party time anymore. It's almost akin to the 80s Oilers, right? When the partying stopped and Gretzky went home that one summer and Walter slapped him upside the head and said, stop all the shenanigans, and went back, and they all became men.
Yeah. It's, it's very much like that. And you kind of grow a foundation for a team, which I think we're starting to put together. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah. What else we got to talk about Oilers wise? Anything you want to chat about?
I don't think so, buddy. I said we covered probably the little bit of what's out there for the short term, and just I'm still kind of buzzing from having Jack on. To steal his phrase, the pleasure was all ours, obviously, and that was an honor. Outside of that, I don't know. Thanks for having me this weekend, buddy. It was fun being out there.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Dash came out to Halifax. We toured around Nova Scotia a little bit, had some fun, talked some hockey, of course.
Got a
little bit muddy. Yep. Did some whitewater rafting on the Shubenacadie River, which is one of the only places you can, maybe the only place. Whitewater rafting on the tide as it comes in. We do have one question here in the chat. How many games do you think Xavier plays this season? That's funny because we actually talked about him.
We did.
Well, yeah, we have a short conversation about him when you were out here.
We were talking about Maverick Bork actually, and it
And
just
Bork,
came up
yeah.
because we were talking about Maverick Bork. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's ultimately however Xavier Borgo plays when he's called up. I mean, honestly, if he's given that opportunity and can somehow magically play in a top 6 or middle 6 role as a scoring winger and keep producing, then he could probably play 30 or 40 games. If he's going to need some maturity in the AHL, which I assume he probably will, then that opportunity will probably go more to a guy like Holloway, and I'd say Borgo gets about 5, maybe 8 games.
Yeah. Guys in Borgo's situation, if your team's doing well, they don't benefit at the NHL level coming to play because they're,
Maybe a black ace.
yeah, somebody's got to get injured for them to get any games. And like he's,
Mhm.
there's no
I meant to say
no
that.
value in having him in the bottom 6.
He gets 15, 20 games if they run into 4 or 5 injured wingers around the same time.
Yeah, some strangers.
I'm not even sure he's the first call up with,
Some stranger says
Boy.
he'll be a trade chip, and funny we kind of
Well, we talked about that, didn't we, Michael?
Yeah, we did talk about that. I mean, there's a couple of these guys. You got to figure a couple of these young prospects are going to be trade chips come deadline time, if not before, and Borgo might be one of those guys. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, that was I think that's exactly what we were talking about when we were talking about him. I saw him play when he was in the queue. It was a little bit unfair because he was ready to play at the pro level. His final year in the queue, he just looked. I don't want to say uninterested, but you could tell it was not the level that he should be playing at. And so he's being successful at the pro level. I think he'll be an NHLer. I really do. It might not be with the Oilers, just given where we're at. Yeah,
that's fair. I made a note earlier, so I lied. There is something else I want to talk about.
All right.
We had a comment earlier way back when Jack was on, and I'm sure he was wanting to ask it to him. But I know you have had this conversation when you were a guest on another podcast, but you and I have not really had a chance to have this little conversation. I think I might kind of disagree with you. So Jack Jensen earlier asked, do you think the Oilers are better this upcoming season than last year? And I know that you mentioned on a previous podcast that you don't think that the Oilers are better at this point in time.
No, that's not
they ended the season. Have you come around on that?
No, that's not exactly my words. I didn't think. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I don't think they're much better. Not sizably better, right? Like not enough. Like it's if they are better, there's not enough to you're talking like points of percentages. So no, I haven't come around on that. I still think that's the same. However, saying that, I mean, it's like Jack said, or not, like Jack, not Jack Jensen, but like Jack Michael said. I mean, this is a team that's been around year after year after year for a few years now, right? The guys have grown. So there's some maturity there. There are certain things that will be better about this team. They were close last year. It's like he said, right? I mean, a couple of scoring plays difference from maybe being the team that enters as the team from the West. So, did they need to be a whole lot better? Maybe not even, right? Like there's a couple things they changed. I think they're another year with Ekholm. So, with that having said, like a full year, they're going to be better on that part. But from the team that went into the playoffs to the team we have today, we're still talking about who's going to be a fourth line center, right? The top 6 is more or less the same, depending on what happens with Connor Brown, right? Like either he is some, big change, which I don't think he will be. I think this top 6 is going to be pretty close to what we had last year, minus Yamamoto, which I think is an upgrade, maybe. So maybe they are a little better. But no, I just don't. it's just not sizable enough that, you know, and if somebody gets injured again, we're back in the same spot, right? So
Yeah, and I think most people's argument fall on this whole, oh, Connor Brown's just such a huge improvement, and he's Hyman light, and his motor's going to push his teammates just like Hyman does, and this can elevate us to another level. And I'm not believing in that, but where I would probably start my debate with you, I do think they're better. I think they're better right now for a couple of reasons. I think they're better because we'll have 82 games of Ekholm.
yeah, but I'm
Flat
saying
out.
the team that went into the playoffs last year, is it better than that
Yep.
team? Like,
Yeah,
'cause we
it's
had
still
Ekholm going into the playoffs.
it's still right there because Yamamoto's never been a playoff performer. You know, I'm a big fan of his. You know, I'm a fan of what he does on the ice. But if we have a guy in the playoffs like Brown that can do that, be healthy and with size, and yeah, that is an improvement. And ultimately, I think the younger players like Niemelainen and Deharnay and Holloway and some of McLeod should all take another step. It's just a natural progression that they do. So that said, I think just the pure improvement of our young players and Jack Michaels spoke to the maturity, the adultization of the core. So I believe those
Now
things
you're
all
making
do
up
matter
words.
and they add up. Hey, right. So I do. I think they are better. And I'm going to, add to that with saying that I think that the team that we start the year with will not be the team that we go into the playoffs with.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that part we agree on.
I mean, and I don't think we're that, like, I think you're making more out of what I said than what I said. I just don't think this team is,
How long have you known me?
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I know that's what, that's what you do. Like this is still a good team, right? Last year's
Yep.
team was still a good team. Did we think they could have made it to the final last year? Yeah, hell yeah. And they almost did, right? They were close. Close doesn't matter much. This team
Nope.
again, same sort of thing. There's a lot of different, players. I don't think that losing Yamamoto is a big deal, and gaining Connor Brown, is great. But we don't. The challenge is we don't know what Connor Brown's really going to bring. But if he brings anything, like if that chemistry from Junior is there still, which we talked about that at length on the last podcast and the one before that.
Yeah.
If that chemistry is at all there, oh man, look out, right? Like if there is anything approaching having McDavid and Draisaitl play, 1 and 2 for a full season and never having to go, as we call it, the nuclear option.
What if
this team's
unreal. What if
unreal.
Brown is Kunitz? What
Yeah.
if Brown is Kunitz?
I mean, you just don't know, right? And so, did changes need to be made? Absolutely. Did Ken Holland come through and make those changes? Yes, he did.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, that's
that story needs to be written.
Given the
why we play the game.
Yeah. Some stranger says last year's team really struggled in the first half of the season, and they did, right? Yeah, but
that's every Oilers every year, and
yeah,
they struggle in the first part of games. They struggle in the first part of series. That's just the team that needs to get slapped in the face before they slap back. Just spin our culture.
I mean, that'd be maybe a topic for another night, but I feel like that's a conversation worth having. Like as this team goes with some consistency with coaching, which we haven't had ever until now, right? So we keep talking about having Ekholm for another season. What about having Woodcroft for another season?
Yeah.
Not to mention how
him improving as well.
Yeah, like Woodcroft, I think we're lucky to have a guy that continues to improve, that doesn't just sit and say, I'm good with the kind of coach that I am. Like anytime you listen to him, he's a student of the craft. And so, I'm happy to have him. I'm happy to have him for multiple years and build relationships with these players. And, understand, and I like his system. Obviously, between all the coaching staff, the power play is doing the right things. Hard to
Yeah.
argue that. So, and McDavid had his best year ever under Woodcroft. Look, there's a lot of reasons, I guess, to upgrade where I said. Just on paper, I just don't think they're like 10 times better or anything like that, but they're marginally better.
No. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. All right. We're at the hour. Been, anytime you have Jack Michaels on the show, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, man.
If you want to go check out my Twitter account at Oilerslive, we're going to do a little hockey bracket, but for Oilers pups. So check that out. Merlin's got a little message for you. You can check that out. Make sure you turn the volume up. Doing stupid shit, during the middle of the day. So that was fun. Yeah. Anyway, post your pups pictures. We'll get you a heavy hockey prize pack after we do the bracket. See who wins that. Angel said it perfectly. Don't forget to hit the like button. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit follow, hit like, hit subscribe. Go to heavyhockey.com. We had a shout out today by Oilers After Dark. Said we're one of the best sites for Oilers content. You know what? Humbly, I'll just say the guys are writing great stuff. Lotsy, Eric,
It's all
Josh,
about the team. Yeah.
like Kirk, you name it. All of these guys are just doing great work. And then the fantasy hockey guys, yeah, they continue to pump out some great content if you're into fantasy hockey. And as I've always said, just stay tuned. I mean, lots more is happening at Heavy Hockey. We're just going to keep doing what we do and add to what we do. So that's enough from me. I will pass it off to Mr. Dash in the Park, who has been probably dying to get the last word for guaranteed for the last 5 days, because he never got the last word while he was here. You can imagine. Yeah. Dash, I'll leave you with the last word. You know the drill. Everybody else, have a great night. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I didn't expect any last words, so I don't have anything planned. And we got all these rock star guests lately. Privy to our Jack Michaels tonight was Alan Lowtide Mitchell and Bruce McCurdy on our previous episode. If you're new to the show tonight, go back on YouTube or anywhere where you can find podcasts and go and listen to that one. And before then, we had some of the producers from TSN 1260 with Matthew Wannock and Connor Halley and Jeff Walker and Hernan Salas. So we're going to try and keep bringing you the big hitters, and hopefully this keeps growing. So we really appreciate all of our regulars, Some Stranger, Angel, Renegade, Black Mazikari, Octane, Jay, Jack, all you guys. Just keep tuning in. We love you. Honest to crap, it's not just saying something to say please subscribe. We're not saying it because we don't want you to do it. If you're watching on YouTube right now and you haven't hit the subscribe button, I'm going to find you. Hit it. Hit your notifier button. And when that notifier bell goes off, you're going to know every Tuesday at 9:00 we're hitting the air, and you won't miss it. Let me close with this. You mentioned Woodcroft earlier. There's a couple of polls I put out recently, and I'll maybe touch on those. We're on the last word, so nobody else can comment. But that said, if you've watched the show now or after, let me know in the comments. I want to go back and look after and see what everybody thinks. But I'm going to predict two things here. The Bruins are going to take a bit of a dive. I believe everybody should suspect that, with given their losses of Taylor Hall and Bergeron and Krejci, and that's pretty much a top line. Like Jack said, their captain. Woodcroft holds the second best record in the NHL since he was hired. That was eclipsed only by the Boston Bruins, that broke a record for being the best team in the history of hockey last year. Given they take a bit of a decline, and the Oilers continue to be the consistent team that they are in the Western Conference, I'm going to say that by the end of this season, Woodcroft has the best record in the NHL over the time that he's been coaching and since he was hired. And if that's the case, we're lucky to have him. The other prediction I'm going to make was a poll I put out earlier today. I found it interesting when I was just doing a little bit of research. I was in the airport. Wayne Gretzky finished with the Edmonton Oilers in total points was 1,667 points for the Edmonton Oilers. In 808 seasons, with the Oilers, Connor McDavid has scored 850 points. So he's about halfway there for rough math. By the time 97 is done as an Oiler, I do believe he will surpass Wayne Gretzky as the highest scoring Edmonton Oiler of all time. So I'm going to leave with that. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe. Please like. Please keep tuning in. Go to heavyhockey.com and good night.